Welcome back to Female Voices Life and Loss. I'm LaWayna, and we have Teresa with
Hi,
us.
friends.
And today we are blessed to speak to Stacey Johnson, Women Empowerment Coach. And so we're just going to learn all about her today. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And thank you so much for reaching out. Teresa was like, your stories align. You guys should chat.
For sure.
And a lot of them align. So, Stacey, we're going to jump right in, unless you want to give us a little bit of background, about who you are, why you chose this work. Sure. Me and Teresa know, but the audience doesn't know.
Sure. Yeah. So I've been a clinical therapist for, about 25 years in the state of Ohio. And most of my background has been with children in an alternative school, so a special needs school. But I've always worked an extra job or like a second job in clinical work in agencies, an ER. And I've had lots of experience working in many different mental health areas. It'll be 4 years in November. My husband passed away. And shortly after he passed away, probably like 6 months to a year, I realized I need extra income. So I was still working at the school, but then decided to do some telehealth because then it was a little bit more flexible for my schedule, but I could bring in some extra money. And I was seeing a lot of women that were dealing with burnout, overwhelmed, and grief. Some form of grief, not always a funeral type of grief, but the silent griefs. And I was getting a lot of referrals. And so I was becoming pretty busy with that. And I decided that I wanted to do more. I wanted to go beyond the state of Ohio. And so I resigned after 20 years of being in the same position at a school.
Wow.
And continued to do telehealth with my clinical work, but then expanded into coaching as well so that I can go beyond the state of Ohio. Because when you have clinical therapy, you need to stay in the state of Ohio. Of course, they're changing that now that telehealth is becoming more popular. You just have to get licensed in the other states, and that's just too much for me.
It is. It's a lot there. What I'm sure that was a shock to the school. Like, dang it, 20 years and you're over this. So I'm sure everybody's like, what?
Yes. It was a huge shock, a huge change, but I think it was needed for me too. I've been able to do a lot of my own healing because there was a lot of burnout from that, field for 20 years. And so.
And bless you for wanting to do it that long. Bless you. I did school counseling for a year. I was like, yeah, I'm good on this. Just because I saw similar things that you probably see as well, that, the parents need to be involved, the administration needs to be involved for a real change to happen.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about just the differences in being a therapist and now transforming into a coach. Like, what does that look like? And I share your journey.
Well, the biggest difference that I see is that in coaching, when I'm coaching my women, I'm getting a sense that there's more of a commitment. In therapy, they're in crisis. So they come, they get stabilized, and then a lot of times they just kind of stop coming as often, or they start no-showing more. And I don't ever really get to see the final endpoint. Where in coaching, I do. They're more committed. They typically have gotten through the crisis, but now are dealing with the life and are looking for the life that they want to have beyond the crisis. Yeah. And so they stick out and they stick through it and they do the work. And then I see the end result. So, and there's none of the insurance kind of documentation and, all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
Restrictions.
Yeah.
Time wasters too. I'm gonna read this soap note. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm with you. Thankfully, AI has helped with a lot of that. But I'm with you. I'm right there with you. So, Stacey, can you take us back to the moment you realized your calling was shifting? And you said a lot of it already, from clinical therapy to coaching women online. So just, you realized that calling and what prompted the leap. And you shared already, but there might be some more information that we didn't hear.
The biggest leap for myself was that, one, I was seeing so many women that, really were coming to my telehealth that could definitely be one of my clients in coaching. They were seeking out, they were doing the silent grieving, they were burnout. But then also my own burnout was, I had been in this, at the school for 20 years. And there was a lot of changes, especially after COVID. We seemed to have less staff. I was putting in more hours, and I just felt like I just didn't feel the passion like I did when I first started in the field. And working with women, as I'm seeing them make some changes, I just felt that inner kind of calling, like I want to be able to see more. And I just wanted that. And I felt more passionate, and then I met with a business coach who had been a therapist and herself, and she had created a program that were, basically for therapists that want to become coaches. And I talked to her and I was like, yes, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do.
I'm right there with you, though. I'm right there with you. But I probably got there a lot quicker than you got there. After a year or two, I was like, yeah, I don't want to do this like this. So,
yeah. Well, I started therapy, I got my license. I became licensed in 1999. And so coaching really wasn't, you really didn't hear about it,
Right.
And I really didn't start to hear about coaching until after my husband passed. And then I had attended a couple coaches trainings that were, on grief specifically. And the one time I went to their training, I was like, I can do this. These are some of the things that I teach my own clients in therapy practice. So I'm like, okay, yeah, this is something I can do. And it is appealed to me. Like, I was like, yes, this is something that I can have more people involved at the same time, because my program is group. And so I can reach more people at the same time and not feel so drained with all the necessarily the paperwork and everything else that kind of goes into therapy.
What you said earlier about, seeing the kind of the end results and not just always in crisis. I feel like that is a huge part of coaching, is not always that crisis mode, week after week after week, that you're working through that and you're doing the life stuff for people and helping them with those life goals. What I believe in my coaching is really taking them through that crisis, but really setting them up for just joy, purpose, peace for the rest of their life. So,
Yep.
Love that.
So let's see. So in 2021, you experienced 2 profound losses within just weeks of each other. Can you walk us through that season and what it was like for you emotionally, spiritually, and physically?
October 29th, I get a phone call from my mom. And actually, I was at the school still. And I wasn't allowed to have my cell phone. It just wasn't a thing. Like, you just can't keep your cell phone on you. And we would be in crisis a lot with the kids that I worked with. And so sometimes it was not safe for me to have my phone because I could have gotten broken or whatever. And so I was in a classroom And my radio, I had a walkie-talkie, and my secretary had called and on my walkie-talkie and said I had a phone call. And it was my husband, actually, because he says, your mom's been calling you and can't get a hold of you. And she's called me and something's going on with your stepfather, used his name, and said, call her and then call me right back. And so when I called my mom, she basically had said that, my stepfather was non-responsive that morning and that everybody was at the hospital. She did not tell me at that time that he had already been declared deceased. She kind of left that out because I think she wanted to kind of protect me until I got there. And so it was very shocking because I had just talked to them like a day before, he passed. And then the day that she went into shock, once everybody all the kids kind of got there, she went into kind of more of this shock and continued to repeat things. And it took me a while to get her out of the emergency room. Everybody, all the other family were left. And it was my brother and I, her 2 biological children. The other children were my stepfather's children, and they had already left. And so I was using my mindfulness techniques, a lot of things to try to get her to go home. And once we get home, she then tells us like her blood pressure wouldn't come down. She didn't feel right. And so then we rushed her back to the ER.
Oh, God.
We ended up going to the one ER where her doctor was, but this is 2021. And so COVID was still pretty predominant, even though our society was opened up. We walked into the emergency room and it was packed. And I say she is having chest pains, her blood pressure is high. And they're like, well, she can go in, but you can't go with her. And she's like, absolutely not. She turned immediately around and walked right back out of the emergency room. And I'm like calling my brother who was parked in the car saying, she's not staying. And he's like, what? I'm like, nope, I can't force her. So off we go back to the emergency room that my stepfather was at, where the emergency room that was closer to her home. And they knew the circumstances. They allowed my brother and I to go into the emergency room with her.
Good.
And then they ended up doing tests, and they weren't seeing any signs of a heart attack at that time. But because her blood pressure wouldn't come down and some other symptoms, and she's already on blood pressure medication themselves, they wanted to keep her overnight to observe her. And she agreed to that. And they actually allowed my brother, or they were going to allow one of us to stay the night. And my brother chose to stay. So I go home. So the next day she discharges herself against medical advice. They wanted her to stay and do some more tests. And she's like, no, my blood pressure feels fine. I'll call my cardiologist, but I have a funeral to plan. And so we leave and, we do his funeral. They did do a stress test on her and said as soon as the funeral is over, they wanted her to come in because they were going to do another test. And so his funeral takes place the day of his private gravesite service. My husband comes home that night and says, I don't feel good. And I'm like, what?
Right.
And I could start to see it on him. Like I could see his congestion. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, no, this cannot be happening. And so I went back to work, and then I call him because my uncle had called me and said, your mom had the test and they're putting a stent in. So she's staying the night. I'm like, okay, well, let me leave work. So I'd already been off of work a week, go back to work. And they, so now and so I called my husband and I said, I need to go to the hospital. My mom's being admitted. And he's like, well, I'm on my way home from work. I feel like a truck ran me over. And I'm like, okay. So at the time, libraries were giving free COVID tests. So I picked one up on the way home. My daughter is an STNA and she was working an evening shift. So she was home when I got home, I said, here's a COVID test your dad. I got to get some stuff together and go be with grandma. positive for COVID.
Mm. Mm.
So now I'm home another week because at that time, if you live with someone, you also have to quarantine.
Right.
But I was not quarantining very well because now I have my mother in the hospital with heart. I'm taking care of her. I seclude him to our bedroom and I start sleeping on the couch. Mm-hmm. And a week of him being at home, and then a week later, I make the decision to take him to the ER because he's just not doing well. And that same day that I admitted him to the ER, I also had to take my mom to the ER. So I took my mom to the ER in the middle of the night. Calls me with AFib, deal with that, then come home. And I'm like, I just don't like the way that you're not you're still not getting any better. Mm-hmm. You're late week into this and you have less energy today than you did a week ago. So I'm taking you to the ER. And he didn't fight me. So I knew how sick he was if he wasn't fighting me.
Good.
And we get there and they tell me he's got double COVID pneumonia. And he was going to ICU.
Wow.
And a week later, he passed in the hospital. Mm-hmm. The reason was very emotional on us. But now that I look back, I just kept doing.
Yeah.
That's how I kept myself safe, I guess. Mm-hmm. For some reason, I have no idea how I stayed COVID negative through the whole time. Mm-hmm. But my 2 kids got it. And so I don't even know how I did sleep. I did sleep during those times, except for when I was in the emergency rooms with everybody. I think I did go, 36 hours with no sleep the one day between going back and forth to 2 different emergency rooms. But then, after he passed, it was like, wow, this has been a whirlwind of 3.5 weeks. It was a 3.5 week span. And I'm like, wow, what the heck just happened? And then I just went into doing mode. I had his business to kind of close. I had a kid that was going to be going to college. So I had to figure out her student, I had already submitted student FAFSA stuff based on him living. And then I'm like, oh, well, I completed that a month too early. Now I have to revamp things because now we have one income. And so I have one going to college and I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. My to-do list, I was like, that's what, if I kept busy, then I didn't really realize everything that was happening to me. And I'm like, that probably wasn't the best mode.
And you know that now, right?
Right.
Man, so putting one foot in front of the other is just kind of what needs to get done. When did you slow down enough to start dealing with the grief? Well,
probably because my daughter raced 4-wheelers at the same time. It was nationally racing, and he always did it. Mm-hmm. She starts racing again, usually in the end of February. I continued even to keep going because I had to make sure that she was doing what she loved to do. So I probably, once I kind of slowed down, was probably in the summertime because school had let out. Mm-hmm. But then we had figured out FAFSA, so we knew she was going off to college. So I still had things I was doing in the background, but I had more time for myself. And that's probably when I started to really do some of my grief work. Mm-hmm. Because shortly after he passed away the day before Thanksgiving. So unfortunately we had, holidays too that we had to kind of get through. Wow. And a lot of people were like, oh, you were so strong. Cause the Christmas tree went up the week before he passed because it was a couple days, it was 4 days because he had been intubated. And so my kids were really not doing well. And so my other brother was like, what can I do to help? And I'm like, my daughter, I'm like, she wants the Christmas tree up. He goes, I'm on it. So he came over to put the Christmas tree up. But then I did the rest of the decorating. And like my one friend who had a loss a couple of years before me with her husband, she was like, I don't know how you did it. Like, continued to decorate for Christmas and buy Christmas gifts. And I'm like, I don't know. That's just what I needed to do. I just, you know, like that's what my brain said I needed to do, was just keep going and keep everything as much as the same as possible.
How did, your training as a therapist help or complicate the grieving process?
Yeah, I think it did help me because I did get back into taking care of I was taking care of myself. Like I was eating the healthy things, and I went back to my exercise. Like I went back to work. I worked for a school. The season ended up being pretty, I guess if that was the only lining of this, was that the season was timing well for my school. So I went back right after the new year. And it worked well. Like I felt like that's what was needed to do. I needed to have that structure. But then I went back to my exercise class. So I was taking care of myself because I knew that was needed. I knew I needed to do the physical piece of taking care of myself. And then it was slowly but surely when I would start to like listen to other podcasts and then I started to say, oh, I know these things. Start implementing them yourself. And that's when I started doing some of the other internal grief work for myself. So I think, my therapy background at the time, it wasn't like I was like thinking, oh yeah, these are the things that I need to do. But once I was reminded, then I was like, oh yeah, kind of some of the cognitive stuff, because what kept me stuck, I think, for the longest time was those what if questions. Like, what if I would have called the doctor sooner? Should I have done this? Should I have done that? And that once I got past that and changed my language, I noticed a shift as well.
Wow. It's amazing. I just can imagine you and mom, losing your partners. Were you guys like a rock for each other? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like, wow.
Yeah. I mean, obviously my mom, she's always been my rock, but then, she recognizes like definitely something different because she's at the age where you start to expect, even though my stepfather was still fairly young in kind of like society norms. I mean, he was only in his 70s. So still fairly young, but she's like recognized how different that is because for me, my husband was 49 and I was 48. Our kids still lived at home.
Yeah.
And I still had to make, like I said, I had one graduating from high school that year, going to college. So there were a lot more things that were involved, that I needed to do.
So you talked about that you were stuck for a while, and I'm assuming from what we've read about you, like some unprocessed grief and how it affects, you talked about how it affects the body and affects things. Was that something that you experienced, or is that something that you're experiencing now more with and learning more about with your clients? You talked about the nervous system and all of that.
Yeah, because I think I was doing some work with my own self-care. I feel like my nervous system was pretty regulated, but there were definitely times now that I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, that was probably my nervous system screaming at me to like take a break, and I notice it now. I'm more aware of it. Like if I've had a day where I'm kind of not doing my self-care at the end of the day, that heavier chest feeling, the tighter muscles, I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably my nervous system trying to tell me like, hey, like do something. And so I definitely ignored some of the signs when I was doing my own work. And so now I'm much more aware of those signs. And with my work with my clients, the one thing is that I'm trying to teach them is recognizing those signs to do that things. And as I've done my own work now, I realize like those silent griefs. I also had to grieve this future that I envisioned. that I would have. Not just my partner, but we had talked about things we would do once our kids graduated from high school and college and just that. And I still plan on doing those things, not necessarily with him physically next to me, but I know that spiritually he's with me, on doing some of those things. And that's the thing that I had to recognize, that I could still have these joyful memories with my life and still miss him. Like, missing him does not impact my joy.
It's very hard to get to that point. You know what I'm saying? Like, I lost my son 2 years ago, and it'll be 2 years in August. And it was very hard to hold that joy and the grief at the same time. It's a very complicated, experience.
It is very complicated. But that's one thing that I teach my clients, is that your own identity. I think I lost my own identity long before I lost my husband, because I was John's wife, or I was my kid's mom, and I'd been an employee for 20 years at the same place. So I never really knew who I was. And so I'm learning more about who I really am and what I enjoy more, versus doing things like I enjoy doing all the other things that my family did, but I did them for them, not necessarily for me. And so learning my own joy as well has been part of my process.
It causes us to stop and take a look, really take stock in how we're living our life. And, is this really what we wanted to be doing? It kind of gives yourself permission to change lanes.
Right. So, exactly.
So that part of it is like really, really exciting. And I love that you love working with women, because I do too as well. But I love talking to women. Seasoned women is probably my sweet spot, because we are at that age where we're figuring out, wait a minute, I don't have to do this. Wait a minute, my husband can do this or that, or the kids can do this or that for themselves. And so we start taking like some of our power back and some of those goals we might have had for ourselves before we fell in love and became a mom and all those other things. I just love hearing about that, and I love just hearing women get excited about their own journey, aside from all the other, people in their life.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
It's so exciting.
Rediscovering who we are as women is very powerful. I think, like you both have said, we push ourselves. What we enjoy, we push that to the side to take care of, because we're natural caretakers and nurturers, and we push that aside for many times way too long, and many times it's until something tragic happens, or something shifts in losing a job, or there's some sort of a change in what's going on, until our eyes are open. Hopefully for a lot of us, some it's not. They stay there. But it's really cool, and I too enjoy just working with women to rediscover that. I'm just finishing up a talk at the library for women that are going through divorce and separation. And our big topic this past week was, who are you? Like, what is your identity outside of no longer married or no longer with someone? Who are you? And we really dug deep into that. And I think I love that you're doing that, and you did that to really discover who you were outside of all those, outside of all the titles that we've taken on through our years.
Exactly. And those are the silent griefs too, that our society, we give people grievances. There's grievance policies in place when we have a funeral type of loss, but all those other losses, like in a divorce or a job change, or even ourselves, and those losses that happen also with the funeral type of loss in regards to, and it happens with divorce, the loss of your future, the loss that future that you envision.
I'm probably one of those people that is uniquely blended with all of the losses. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have a divorce loss. I have a child loss. I had most recently a physical identity loss as I learn more things about this lupus that I have. It's just like so many things that we don't really pause and just look at. Like, this is hard.
Because what I've noticed is that a lot of times the women that come to me, they come to me saying like, I'm overwhelmed and I'm burnout or I'm stressed. And once we start to pull back some of the layers, those are the symptoms that they're experiencing. But it's been that like pushing through to keep doing. And underneath it is usually a loss of some sort that has been there and that they've ignored and then kept pushing through to keep doing. And then their nervous system has finally said enough is enough. And they have these physical symptoms of feeling burnout and stressed and overwhelmed. Sometimes even like physical symptoms that they just can't get rid of, like a neck strain or high blood pressures or IBS symptoms. And it's usually, those are the kind of things that they're like, I need it to stop.
Right. You like, it will when you stop.
Yeah. And I just think, I think society as a whole, I feel like we're all three of us are part of educating society that when there is that overwhelm and there's that stress and all of those things, to work with someone to dig deep underneath that to see why, what's the root. And like you said, many, many times, it's some sort of a loss that is down there that needs to be resurfaced and brought to the forefront so that it can be worked through and dealt with. But we want to keep pushing it down. Oh, it can't be that. I dealt with that a long time ago. No, it can't be that. And in reality, it is.
I don't know that a lot of women that I speak to, I don't know that they've ever acknowledged it because they didn't have permission to say that this hurt me.
Yeah.
What might be superficial to one person is a deep wound to another. What does it look like to befriend your emotions rather than suppress them?
Good question. I'm actually doing a free event that starts tomorrow. And one of the topics is getting to the root of our emotions and giving them permission to be seen. And so one thing that I do is I give the language to emotions, because how many times when someone says, how are you? We say, okay, fine.
No. I swear to God, I did not. My cousin did this to me, right? So I have a cousin. She's a little messy. So she does things and so I said, I'm going to hit her with it. And she said, Wayna, how are you doing? I said, girl, I am depressed, right? And she said, gosh, don't share that with me. Just
like, we don't want to deal with that.
Right. And I did it on purpose. I'm going to say that I wasn't depressed. But I wanted to see what she was going to do with that information if I were in need, right?
Right.
So I said it to her just to see what she would say. Now, mind you, this cousin is a social worker. I said it to her just to see what response I would get. And then she said that. And I said, well, why would you ask me how I'm doing if you don't really want to know?
Exactly.
And I think we get into those kind of, I'm fine. Like you guys said, I'm fine. I've never been one of those people. I came out the wound as this chatty, boisterous person. So I've never been one of those people that would be like, I'm fine. I'd be like, no, my husband got on my nerves today and these kids are irritating me.
I think the three of us to make a pact. I mean, you're already doing it, LaWayna, but Stacey and I, to make sure when someone asks us that we throw them off guard.
Right.
Be a thrown off guard. I mean, I just want everybody to be more transparent with how life on them, especially Stacey, you talking about COVID. We all had a loss. There were so many, and I'm being a little judgy in saying that I feel like women had triple losses than men because we are caretakers, we're moms, we're all these things, and COVID just smacked us around a little bit.
We'll let you finish answering that question. What was it? How do you befriend emotions?
Emotions rather than suppress.
Sorry.
So one, I use an emotional wheel, and I really have my clients start using the language, and I start having them, and I provide them some journaling topics that really start to have them exploring these emotions so that they can be, one, more comfortable in the language of using it versus suppressing them, and having them do some grounding work that, again, has us looking at our emotions, just sitting with that space and connecting to ourselves. And so then they can start to be more familiar with the language and the signals that our body is giving us so that we can start to be more aware of. So I give them more emotional awareness so that they know how to acknowledge it, how to be more aware of the emotions, and then being aware of these signals that, again, our body gives us of what we might be feeling, instead of just saying, let me forget about that. So, and giving them permission to acknowledge it, being able to say, like, yeah, I'm frustrated right now, or I'm overwhelmed by whatever is happening. And learning to be in control, because there's so many things that we can't control, but our emotions are one thing that we can control. And so being more aware of our emotions gives us, again, that power.
I feel like we control them all the time, and it's just like letting go of the need to even be in control, especially with all of those kind of losses. So sometimes I just have my clients stop. Like, we're going to stop because our culture wants us to pull yourself up by your bootstraps,
Right.
So you might say some hurtful things happening to you, but and then you're like, I'm okay though. And I'm like, yeah, you're not. So then I force a pause. Like, no, stop.
Right. And I give them routines to how to acknowledge those feelings, the grounding practices in the morning, and some journaling prompts to get them more aware of those emotions, so that when they do have those signals in the middle of the day, they kind of know what are their options instead of just pushing them down.
It's so true. It's so hard not to push them down. You get so used to.
Right. Well, and like you said, our society kind of tells you that too. Pull up your, and not being afraid to express them I don't know how many times that I would catch myself getting teary-eyed after my husband passed if someone would ask something, and I apologize for my tears. Well, I don't do that. I don't do that anymore. Like, my tears is one way that my emotions are being released at that moment, and it's okay. And so giving women that permission too, is that you do not have to apologize because you have a feeling.
Yeah, it's hard to get out that mode, though. I think as women, we're like, oh, I don't want to show emotions. Sorry. Yeah. I don't. I just like, this is how I'm feeling. And I do speak their names. You know what I'm saying? My husband doesn't, because he doesn't want to make other people feel uncomfortable. And I was like, I don't care about them feeling uncomfortable. Like, yes, I have 4 children. One of them has passed away. My husband looks at me like, ugh. Why you have to? I don't care. Hey, yeah, he did. So this is the journey that I'm on right now. So what role has the community or the sisterhood played in your own healing and the healing of your clients?
That's another good question. I know that I myself have some friends that I, have really connected to and are able to talk to. And that's the other part that I really enjoy when I work in small groups, is that collaboration from other women. The idea that I'm not alone, and that there's this other women in our space that can be, because I give them that safe space to be vulnerable, that it allows them to feel heard and connected to other women.
Yeah, and those group spaces, man, it's like you're not even working half as hard because they're doing the work together. And it is so beautiful to witness and to be a part of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love it. That's the part I love about that compared to like therapy, is that even in therapy groups, I don't think people feel comfortable reaching out beyond the group because we always talk about confidentiality and la 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 la. But like in the coaching group, it's like they also recognize that like they can become for their friend on Facebook, because our group I have a private group that's necessarily for my coaching clients, that when they're in the program, that's kind of where announcements get placed and things like that. But then they start to see their names in the group space. And then, they become their friend on Facebook and they just follow each other or reach out. So that's the difference, I think, also in coaching compared to therapy, that there is more of that kind of sisterhood type of feeling, is that I'm meeting a friend too. Like and
I think we all do. Yeah. And some of those group supports, like, yeah, that's the biggest takeaway for me, is just developing those relationships are really, really impactful.
Yeah.
Okay. So what would you say to the woman listening who feels like she's barely holding it on? She's barely keeping it together. She's afraid to fall apart. So she's just holding on for dear life.
That's a good question here at the end, for sure.
There is support out there. You do not need to do it alone. You do not need to be at the end of that rope hanging on any longer. That there is definitely support, whoever you want to work with, that it is there. And you do not need to do it alone.
Yeah. Let go. We're here to catch you and help you.
So true. So true. You are not alone. And so we have been speaking with Stacey Johnson. And Stacey, tell the audience where they can find you. How can they?
Yes, I'm on Facebook, Stacey Johnson. I'm on TikTok. I have my own YouTube channel, and that's Stacey Johnson Coaching. And and my email is pretty easy too. It's Stacey@StaceyJohnsonCoaching.com.
Awesome.
Pretty easy. I'm open to emails. Yeah.
We'll make sure we put all that in the show notes if you missed it. Look for it there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And being on this Life and Loss. Just talking about the sisterhood. And you know how much me and Teresa love the sisterhood. And we love just learning more about other women who are impactful and who are out here doing the work.
Yeah.
So I'm LaWayna Berry. Thank you so much. And Teresa, any last words?
I'm Teresa Reiniger. See you next week.